But welcome, my name is Catherine Needham. And like I said, we're on day 3 of this event talking about healing our spirits. But before we get into all of that, I wanted to see if anyone, and this is where like you can participate in the chat. I will look up in the chat when I ask these kind of questions. Has anyone seen the new Matrix movie, the Matrix Resurrections movie? Yes or no in the chat? Lisa, no. Well, shame on you, Lisa. Has anyone actually seen it? I was just curious because I was so excited for this movie because the very first one is like one of my favorite movies of all time. I feel like it was a movie that shifted our whole paradigm of how we think and how we look at things on a collective level. And so I was kind of hoping that the Matrix 4 movie, The Resurrections, would do that. And I think there's a door to do that, but that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the concept of how these movies are really like collective stories. It's storytelling, and it tells our story in an art form. But that movie changed our paradigm. And I talk about paradigms in my book, Healing Through Shadow Work. I got to plug the book every day, people. Healing Through Shadow Work. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if my video is being recorded. But anyway, paradigm shifting things happen on a collective level. And that was a movie that it appealed to so many people because it was a story we could all relate to in some way. But what it really did by showing this, you have the Matrix, which is like the fake world, and then there's another real world. What that was really doing was helping us to even get accustomed to thinking that way, getting to thinking in more multiple dimensions than just one. And then movies like The Avengers. I love all these things, by the way. We talk about movies all day. Let's talk about that instead of our spirits. But movies like The Avengers introduced this concept of a multiverse and parallel worlds and things like that. And so again, it gets our minds thinking in a more expansive way. And so the way I see life, I'm a very intuitive person, always in touch with the spiritual side of me, but also grew up very analytical, doing all that stuff too. So I see these multiverses and these things as also dimensions within ourselves. So we have these higher dimensions of thought. I'm getting into some loftier things that we'll circle back at the end and talk more about this at the end of the presentation. But we think and we feel in multiple dimensions. And when we can really heal those shadows, we're going to talk about shadow work again. All of this is really through this lens of shadow work, the thing that I wrote a book about, the thing that my group is based on. The Facebook group is Healing Through Shadow Work. And so we'll talk about how all of these things help us to think, not only think and be able to imagine and see these other worlds in multiple dimensions, but also how do we feel in multiple dimensions? One way to feel in a multiple dimension is to have empathy for others. And so the more that you can have empathy for others, the more you are actually connecting heart to heart with someone, really feeling what they're going through. And that is giving you a more perspective. You are deepening and enhancing your own perspective and going deeper within yourself as a result and being able to connect to people. So anywho, movies and things like that or tell our collective stories, but that we also have our individual stories. So yesterday, I'm going to move on here. On the first day of this live event, we talked about how we're kind of having a crisis of spirit right now. People are having a spiritual awakening, but on the other side of it, I don't know what to do. And that's why I'm calling it a crisis of spirit. Because depending on your background, how you grew up, a lot of things are coming in right now. Just at the time that we're in, it's the stuff happening in the world, stuff happening. It's just the time of our evolution. And we're really waking up to the nature of ourselves, our true nature. We're seeing ourselves. I gave the example the other day, like for me, it was the 2016 election. I had always been very spiritual, but like there are certain moments in your life where you're awakened to deeper levels. And it's usually through, a little bit of turmoil, chaos, things kind of get shaken up before they before they even out. That's what we go through to heal and grow. It's just part of the process, people. So for me, it was that election and waking up to how I was behaving. Like there was just a point where I was like, oh my God, like who is this person? And that who are my friends? Like all people that I've called my friends were just at each other's throats, calling each other's names. This isn't me, and this isn't what I believe in and who I think, how I think the world should be. No, I'm not. So I just decided I wasn't going to participate anymore. That was a little bit of a crisis of spirit for me. And so what I embarked on, I guess, would be this journey of shadow work, of healing. I didn't know I was doing shadow work and healing. I was just trying to fix stuff. I wanted to put into practice these things I always put all my memes, like be a good person, love everyone. Well, I was like, let me try to actually do that and see what happens. And so that was my beginning of that shadow work journey. And then I wrote this book, Healing Through Shadow Work. And I've been trying to describe it now. I think a good way people are able to understand it in a more digestible format, because the book is very concentrated. It's a lot. It's a very simple, short book, but might take you a while to really work through it, to read it and work through the exercises. So how I'm describing it now is shadow work. You can look at it in 3 parts. And that crisis of spirit part has to do with the relationship healing. So relationship healing is 1, inner work, and then outer work. Those are the 3 parts. And then yesterday we talked about grieving and loss. And we talked about that because that's essentially what we do when we heal. We are letting go of things, and it's in the letting go that's hard for us. And that's where we get into the grieving. And we can look at it as the stark, that the terrible, painful loss of a loved one, to the loss of a way of life, the loss of our youth, the loss of our children's innocence, the loss of jobs and financial losses, relationship losses, things like that, like, failed relationships. There's so many different types of very big loss in our world, but we don't give enough time to grieve, and we don't allow enough, we don't teach enough about how to process these big things that come up in life, the tough stuff. So yesterday we talked about how do we process that, and I call that inner work. And then we talked about all of the parts of inner work, which I'll mention in a minute. And then today we're going to talk about the outer work. I call it outer work. I made it up. I'm like, I make up terms and phrases. Just does it make sense? We have inner work, we'll have outer work. And that's really putting your beliefs into practice. It's going out and doing the stuff. So we're going to move on here. So we just talked about these 3 parts of shadow work. And again, this is the book. I'm always plugging my book. It's available on Amazon. And it's a really good start for people who are like wondering, what is shadow work? How do I get into it? How do I get started? It's written in a very simple manner. And I talk in various sections about all of these things. It talks about relationship healing. It talks about the inner work that you have to do. And it also talks about the outer work. Now, in my mind, most of shadow work is inner work. But really, you have to start embodying these things in order to make true change. We can't just live in our heads, even though we kind of do. But a lot of us, I found myself, at least at that 2016 election time, when I said I had a bit of an awakening, I found that I was interacting with everyone just on social media. Like I was just, and that can happen. And so that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but just to recognize that we really do need to take it out into the world too. We need to, all of these ways that we're talking about being spiritual, and let's love one another and raise vibrations. We need to be able to walk outside and talk to our neighbors and raise our vibration too. Go out to the grocery store and all that stuff out into the world. And stand behind our woo. I call it our woo. So these things these feelings and this authenticity, and as you connect to your spirit, and as you gain the spiritual practice, it is then having the courage to then take that out and live your life according to that. Not being afraid to talk about it or embarrassed that, your coworker might think us and so. It's just that's who you are. And so part of this journey is learning to embrace who you are and then bravely go out and be who you are. Um, Again, this is we're still recapping here, but it all ties in. Everything really ties together. I like to always break things down, but it's really one big thing. But when you understand the different parts and how they work, then we can put them back together and things make more sense. So as far as the inner work side of things, yesterday we talked about, I showed this, we're talking about inner work and your spirituality, and really what your beliefs are really what define your spirituality, essentially. And we showed this diagram here, or this meme, or whatever you want to call it. And it's supposed to represent people defining like what God is, and they do it, it's like the blind men touching an elephant, different parts of the elephant. And so some people are saying, I think God's a wall. No, God's a tree. Yeah, and I think it's about describing God or religion or something. But I love this example because it really describes a way that we all look at spirituality and the concept of spirit through our own unique lens, through ourselves. And it's a personal, unique relationship. So it stands to mind then that we're all going to see things a little differently. And so we're all kind of touching the same thing. We're all talking about the same thing, this power, whatever it is, it's greater than ourselves, but we're calling it different things. So some people try, describe it as a higher power, God. I think of it personally, and this is me personally, you don't have to, as like an intelligent energy that gives life to everything on the planet. So some people want to give it a name. Some people call that God. You don't have to. Some people refuse to give it a name. Can't be named. So again, once we become aware of our own beliefs and how we've come to these beliefs and how they play out in our lives, it's much easier to look at all the people around us, blinded through our own ignorance, and then we can understand that we really are all kind of talking about the same thing, but I'm talking about it through the words of shadow work. I know some of the things I talk about touch on some of the things that like Joe Dispenza talks about, neuroscience and thoughts and feelings and all that stuff. And he talks about it through his lens of science. We talk about things through the lens of the things that we know. And so what I'm really good at is seeing that, oh, so-and-so is talking about this through this lens, and so-and-so is talking about it through that lens. I can see the commonality. I can see that we're all speaking the same language, but often having trouble realizing that we're doing that. And that is because of some of these shadows that get in the way. Back to shadow work. Going here, clicking on, having trouble literally clicking a button. Okay, there we go. There we go. You can do it, calf. You can push that button. Anywho, so yesterday, again, when we were talking about how do you actually process stuff? And my brain works this way. I have to understand, like, it does this, and then it does this, and it does this. And I spent a career writing instructions and telling people how to do stuff step by step. So it's kind of just how I think. And that's what I did with the shadow work. So we talked about the processing of identifying your triggers, how to trace them, feeling your feelings, forgiveness, gratitude, all the things that we do until we can come to a place of acceptance around whatever it is that we're working on, whether it's a shadow, something within our personality, whatever it is. And in doing so, we move through these different stages of being powerless through phases of discovery. You're discovering yourself as you do this process. You're discovering who you are and the nature of things, and then you're becoming accountable for that. And then you really start healing and letting go and forgiving. And then in the end, you become empowered. And empowerment is just you're conscious, you're in the moment of things. We've healed the past. We don't need to keep rehashing and talking about the past and bringing the past into every situation and you don't need to do that at some point. You move on and you're just in the moment. And so being able to have a process, working through, like, this is my process for processing. It's really helpful, not just for processing pain, but just everything in life. So just stand by it. I think it's a great method. But today we wanted to talk about how do we embody these beliefs? How do we practice practice what we're preaching and begin walking the walk. And so again, this outer work that we're talking about is really, and again, it all ties into your spirit because it's about it's about yourself. The outer work really is it's a emanation of everything from within, and everything within starts obviously with you. So speaking about yourself positively. And to do all this stuff with the things that we're talking about with outer work, you really have to start being able to observe yourself. And to do that, that's why a lot of times I'll say, just sit quietly. You don't have to worry about trying to meditate right now, but just take some time each day, if you can, to reflect. What did I do today? How did I handle this situation? For me, that's how my shadow work started. And it was often with, oh my gosh, like we had yet another, my husband and I had yet another argument. It's like we were having the same argument. And I just couldn't get to the root cause of it. And that doing the shadow work really helped me with that. And then I started doing it with my kids and like how I interacted with them. So where am I getting? Oh, I went way off there. Anywho, we want to make sure that we are speaking positively about ourselves to others. And oftentimes you don't realize it. So again, shadow work, as a reminder, has to do with our unconscious behavior. So the things that you're not even aware that you're doing. And so I can hear when people speak to me, if I say, oh, tell me about yourself, how did you grow up or whatever, tell me about what you do. We often start saying things about ourselves, unconsciously putting ourselves down, saying negative things about ourselves without even realizing it. Because I know I did that for many, many years. It still slips out. That's a constant thing that I think we never stop growing and healing. So that's something that comes back for me often. Is being able to speak positively about myself. We should all be able to do that. Being able to speak authentically. And I think this really speaks to that spiritual part of us, being authentic. Being able to express our feelings to others. This is a big one. This is being able to be in a situation, whether it's, we deal so much right now online with each other, like you're watching this through Zoom and on Facebook. So the online, how we show up online, I do believe that's really, really important. And being able to speak authentically and express our feelings, setting boundaries online is important too. But again, in real life is what we're going for here. Being able to speak authentically to those people that maybe we're having difficulties with. If you're the black sheep of the family, a lot of people, feel like they come into the group, feel like they're the black sheep of the family. Being able to speak to your family members from an authentic place, from a loving and heart-centered place is where I eventually would like for everybody to get. But I know that's hard in the beginning. Loving and heart-centered does not mean you have to embrace everybody and give them kisses and forgiveness. And we want to forgive, but it doesn't mean it has to be all touchy-feely, lovey-dovey. You can love people from a distance, and you can express yourself lovingly and let them know that they will be loved from a distance. These are things that you have to practice, though, getting comfortable speaking authentically. I found that the more that you can speak from your heart, it really doesn't matter the words that are coming out. You can flub a little bit, as long as it's coming from the heart, because that's how we connect with each other, heart to heart. And that's what opens that door for real understanding. So, and then listen, like I said, listening to understand, that's the last bullet here. When we are really truly connecting with people and consciously trying to listen to understand, we can understand them. We can have empathy. We can cultivate empathy that way. So I wanted to mention again, I talk about this in chapter 3 of my book. So I wanted to read a couple of things to speak to these bullets. I'm in Healing Through Shadow Work. And I call them the pillars of self-love. The whole chapter is called Loving Yourself Wholly, WHOLLY. So what does it mean to be authentic? Everyone's always talking, you gotta be authentic. Here's how I define being authentic. Thinking, speaking, and acting from an authentic place within yourself means that you honor the wisdom of your soul or spirit and courageously and consistently come from this place in everything you do. You don't pretend to be something you're not. You don't say yes to please people. You don't shrink so that others don't feel small. You honor yourself and empower yourself when you are authentic. When we are inauthentic, it's usually because of low self-esteem, or fear of what others will think. That's what it means to be authentic to me. And then boundaries. Boundaries is another, I'm calling it a pillar. You got to have these four things. You have to be authentic. You have to be able to understand your boundaries. So you understand your limits and are comfortable telling others what you are or are not comfortable with. It can be as simple as saying no without providing an explanation. You don't always need to explain yourself. Boundaries can be hard to set if you've lived your whole life without them. People will think you're being mean and rude, even if you're being your absolute nicest. Know your limits and be brave in telling others where you draw the line. Boundaries is a big one for many of us. It was and still continues to be for me, because the hardest thing is understanding that we each have different boundaries too. So you have to figure out where your limits are and then stand firm in that. The third pillar is self-care. You know the importance of regularly attending to your body, mind, and spirit, so you do your best to maintain good physical health, take time to clear your mind, and honor and release your emotions. And then the last one is acceptance. Really, all of this is about acceptance. When you learn to accept all aspects of yourself, you can fully integrate all parts of your personality and be unapologetically you. Most of us show the world only our good parts, but after doing the inner work to know and love ourselves, we soon realize there are parts of our dark parts of our personality that we hide because we are embarrassed or ashamed, or because it's not accepted as the norm. And so I'm saying that like these four things actually create the foundation for loving yourself. You want, and that, again, that was like my part of my journey. This came up in my journey where someone was like, well, you don't love you need to love yourself. That's just one of those things. I'm like, you can't, what does that mean? It could mean so many things. So I tried to put this in some tangible ways. When you are speaking authentically, when you are setting your boundaries lovingly, I'm like, it's all gonna come from the heart space now. We're spiritual people. It's coming from the heart space. I mean, you're doing that self-care for yourself, like self-care, obviously, for yourself, but really focusing on not just the bubble baths, but the mental and the emotional side of self-care, and then learning how to accept. I'd say you're doing pretty good in the self-love department if you can do all those things. All righty, what else we have here? And so I guess just a couple more thoughts. I always talk about cultivating self-love, and that this work helps you actually cultivate it. And I was like, well, what does it really mean to cultivate something? Well, you're growing something. You're growing yourself, but you're also growing new beliefs. You have to plant new seeds. You have to nurture things. You have to nurture those seeds. And so when we start this healing journey, it does take work. It's not like, again, I mentioned this the other day, it's not like we're going to do some shadow work on the weekend and I'm good. For some of us that are really changing paradigms, and we're changing so many things from years and years of programming, I mean, it's just a lot, especially, again, the older generation. I'm mentioning my generation and older, only because it's like the older you get, two things: you can get way more set in your ways if you're not working on your healing. But the other side of it is when you do start waking up to this stuff, it's really overwhelming, because it's years and years and years of stuff coming up that you've never dealt with. So it takes work, and this outer, it's not like you do some shadow work and now I'm able to communicate authentically and speak my mind and be loving. It takes some work, and that's why I'm here. So to help you with that. All right. And so I want to go into a little bit of more of the, what do we call this? Esoteric realm. I don't know. I think it's really important. Like I said, I felt like The Matrix was one of those groundbreaking movies that helped us understand helped us open a paradigm to understanding like inner worlds, outer worlds. Not necessarily, I'm saying that everything in The Matrix was true. I'm using it as it was a symbol of something. And that's the great thing about symbols, because they can mean different things to different people. And so to me, it symbolized that connection between worlds. There are multiple experiences happening and they're connected. So we have to learn how to understand in terms of shadow work, this inner work and how it connects to the outer work. And I think you're starting to see that. But where does it really, really start? Where does it really connect? And I think this is kind of where science and spirituality meet, and it's with our thoughts and feelings. That's just, again, this is a personal belief here. But I think it ties in nicely with a lot of the talk that we're hearing now with neuroscience and neuroplasticity and how our hearts and our brains work. So I'm just going to read this. Our thoughts and feelings are connected. Thoughts form in our mind as words and pictures, and they can generate one or more feelings, from simple to complex. Feelings are experienced or felt in our heart space and can generate one or more thoughts. Shadow work helps you get your thoughts and feelings coherent, or operating as a whole unit. That's what coherence means. They're operating as one. And so you hear, this is one of the work of who's doing this, because I don't follow a lot of people, but I'll talk about this and I'll be like, oh, do you follow so and so? That's what he's into. It's either Bruce Lipton or Dispenza that really gets into this. Joe Dispenza. They're looking at it through a lens of science. I look at it through a lens of spirituality, but we're looking at the same thing. That's the cool part of it. And so you just have to find something that really makes sense. I wanted to do an exercise here. I'll read it, but it's really just for something to do offline. And it's to get you really understanding, like at the fundamental core part where things start with our thoughts. And I'll read the quote. I don't know if you can see the quote. This quote, I heard it from my guru many, many, many years ago. I don't know who originally said it, so that's not up for debate. It's just a quote that's out there. I'm going to read it now. I'm like, please don't debate me on the origin of the quote. Here's the quote. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become your character. And watch your character, it becomes your destiny. I heard my guru said it, and I followed a Sai Baba, that was his name, for many, many years, starting back in like the late 80s. So my point of saying all that, I call that out because we were talking about the same thing back then, guys. We were saying the same words. And this resonated with me at the time because it just made sense to me. I was like, you really can control your destiny with just your thoughts. Like, to me, it made sense that everything starts with a thought. But at the time, I wasn't really as connected to the feeling side of me. We had suppressed a lot of feelings. We put those to the side. Like I said, it was a generation. We were raised at a certain time, and feelings were not part of the mix. But we're coming to see that feelings are a part of it, and they're interconnected. It's like you can't have one without the other. I was starting to say that it's not two sides of the same coin, but thoughts generate feelings generate thoughts. And from both of those, they form the repetitive nature of that. If you're feeling the same, if you're feeling like, let's say, in a rut, you're feeling depressed, and it's just generating depressing thoughts. It just makes you think about everything that's going wrong, how you can't get out of, you're stuck, this, that, the other. And so it's like a self-perpetuating thing. It then becomes that. So it's really important for us to understand how it works, but also understand how to pull ourselves out of that, how to recognize when we're going through something like that, and then maybe start taking some steps to come out of it. And so we talked yesterday about some of those steps are the importance of having a spiritual practice, period, but really spending time in gratitude, spending time, forgiveness and compassion. Again, starting with yourself, because we tend to be the hardest on ourselves. I meet a lot of people doing the spiritual work who are like the most kind and loving people, but not to themselves. They don't talk about themselves the way that their generosity and their love extends to everyone, it seems, accept themselves. And that's just based on how I hear them talking about themselves and what I see, what I see happening. So anywho, I want you to, just as an exercise, try to find the connections between your thoughts and feelings. So just spend some time sitting quietly and allow a thought to come up. It can be any old thought. We're not trying to meditate. We're just sitting and identifying our thoughts. It sounds easy, but when you have the distraction of the world kind of like coming in and influencing your thoughts, you can have a lot going on. So the nice thing about shadow work is it helps get those distractions out. We can get rid of that pain and stop ruminating and generating those same low thoughts that are being generated from those painful parts of ourselves. We can spend more time. It's just easier to hone in on what you're thinking and what you're feeling. So how does this thought, you identify your thought if you can. How does it make you feel when you think about this thought? Like, oh, I need to, even if it's mundane, like, oh my God, I got to go to the store before I pick up my daughter. Great, do I have enough time? Like, you start thinking things like that. You may start feeling anxious. Like, I have to go to the store today before I pick up my daughter. The thought of that, I'm like, okay, I'm a little anxious. I need to check my time. Start realizing, and what this helps you do is it helps you really get in tune with your feelings, especially for those of us who've been way out of touch with our feelings. Focus on the thought and then take a minute to be like, how is this really making me feel? Pay attention to how your body's feeling, physically feeling, and not just, and then feel the feeling in your heart space. We feel a lot of those emotions right here in our heart space. And then I want you to try it the opposite way. Allow yourself to feel, just sit there and then think about how you're feeling and focus on the feeling first. And maybe you're like, ooh, I'm feeling really anxious. I don't know why. Focus on feeling anxious and then focus on that feeling and then focus on what thoughts. Try to see what thoughts are coming to mind. And I know maybe I'm asking a lot here, but I think this will help you start connecting your thoughts and your feelings, and it'll help you be more aware of your thoughts and your feelings, especially of your feelings, which again, many of us are kind of out of touch with. Okay. What else do I have here? Oh, so I did mention that when we can really operate authentically, getting those thoughts and feelings coherent, to me, that means they're operating as a whole. So if they're operating as a whole, I'm not having a feeling of like anxiousness and then saying something and pretending that I'm not anxious. I may have to say, you know what, guys, I'm feeling a little anxious right now. I'm going to need a few minutes before I make this decision or before I do X, Y, Z. I don't know why I keep using anxious. Am I anxious? Maybe I'm anxious. I keep talking about being anxious. I'm trying to find like a good emotion that we can all relate to. There. Okay. Are there any questions in the chat? I'm just rambling on. Okay, let's time for questions. I'm going to look in the chat window now and see if anyone has any thoughts. It could be about anything. It doesn't have to be about my thoughts and feelings, inner and outer. Anything about anything we've covered so far. Excuse me. I'm going to drink some water to keep clearing my throat. Okay. Well, I don't see any questions, at least not in the chat in Zoom. So one of the other things with this exercise, and I think it's a good one, and I really would like for you to try it, and I'd love to hear what comes up for you when you do this exercise, or any thoughts or revelations that you have after doing it. I think one of the things it brings to mind, that I look at that quote and it says, starting with our thoughts, we can control our destiny. Do you believe that? Like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm always like, let's see if I like this belief, let's put it to the test, And so what I want to talk about next is a 6-week course that I'm offering. And we're going to dig into things like we're going to get into like this nitty gritty stuff, do assignments and have discussions. And so let's get into that. I'm calling it Healing the Spirit Within. So this is a 6-week course I'm excited to announce. It starts January 24th, and I will be leading it from week to week. And the purpose is exactly all the stuff I just said. Sorry about that. The purpose is to reconnect or connect with your spirit and heal your spirit, but we're going to do it through the system of shadow work I was talking about. So the idea is that we'll meet twice a week. On Tuesdays, there'll be like a Zoom, an hour and a half Zoom. And then on Thursdays, we'll meet in groups. We'll meet in smaller groups to discuss the lessons and things from Tuesday. And then what else are we doing here? And what I'm going to do, instead of offering this like a 6-week pay for it upfront course, I'm going to be rolling many, many courses out. There's another one that I'd like to roll out in January or early February around shadow work. It'll be more for intuitives and healers. That's coming. I did a little seminar on that last year called The Power of Woo, so it's kind of an extension of that. So I'm going to be rolling these classes out to a platform and it'll be a monthly membership. So instead of paying for the course, it'll just be a monthly membership where you get, really, that's the best deal that you can get because you can take multiple courses. But the biggest thing that I'm finding that people need to do this work is support and guidance. And preferably support and guidance for someone who's done the work. And I think that's where the difference that I'm making here is I've done this work. I've healed so many things, and I know how to do it. I don't know what else to tell you. And in doing so, in doing all of this healing on my own self, I mentioned this yesterday, you really do open your capacity for empathy and your intuitive capabilities increase. So, I can bring a healing energy. I don't have to, a lot of people identify with being an empath and like I'm sensitive to things. Yes, I can feel how people are feeling, but I also know how I'm feeling and I can impart that feeling to others. And kind of, if you're feeling sad, I can help lift you up kind of deal. So part of it is just being or being around in a supportive, loving environment where people understand what you're going through and they're serious about the work. So I really wanted to provide a place where we're getting serious and we really want to support each other and we really are wanting to make change in our lives. That's what it's for. And I'll be talking more about it next week as well. Probably do another 3-day thing. You can always visit my website. It's catherineneedham.com for details. I'm going to pause again, see if there's any more questions, and then we're going to wrap it up. Any more questions? Okay. Okay. I'll go slow. If you have something, just put it in the chat before we end. Oh, thank you. I really appreciate you guys coming. I didn't call anybody. I'm like, there's actually participants today. It's exciting. I really appreciate you being here. Most of you are probably from the group anyway, but I just wanted to give a plug to our group. Lots of people are joining, and it's a great place to just kind of get used to sharing, get used to acknowledging your pain. A lot of people will post something and I'm like, oh, wow, that really helped because I'd never really put it into words. And you just acknowledging something in a group of people can be very healing and can be a start to even more healing. So please, you're welcome to join that. Of course, I always want people to check out my book, always. It's on Amazon.com. Check it out. And then I'm also available for coaching. You can just go to my website. I do offer a free 20-minute consultation, kind of sit down and talk about what you're going through and what you need help with. And then if you want to make an appointment, you can just do it right through the website. Thank you again for being here. Again, I'm going to try to go live again next week, and I want to read through it one more time and keep improving this presentation. But again, we're working towards the class that I'm rolling out. I'm very, very, very excited. Just as like as a comparison, I took a class. In fact, one of the gals from class is here today, Lisa. I took a class that I don't normally sign up for things like this. So like asking people to sign up even feels weird to me. But I signed up for a course very out of character in the early summer. That's when that course was. And it's what I got from it was, and it turned out to be phenomenal. It was great, way exceeded my expectations. But the best part of it was just making those connections. We have to connect with people, and we have to make genuine, real, good connections and support each other lovingly. And I'm seeing that happen in our group. And it really happened with even in the class that I took. We were able to meet in smaller groups, and even in the big group. It was just a wonderful feeling. And I want to continue that in my work, continue that wonderful feeling of connection and of healing. So thank you again. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon and connecting with some of you very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Have a good day.